Services from Poly for the same project, and then the DSIP grant application and the ADEM pre-application. We've got the contract planning services from KPS for our comprehensive plan, and a request to dispose of some inventory from Parks and Rec. Any comments, concerns, questions on the consent agenda? All right, then we'll have privilege of the floor and staff reports, and we'll move into old business. So we're amending, if you remember, we introduced this a month ago, 2 meetings ago, a ordinance 100422 to amend table 4-1. Barry, could you refresh our memory on this, just making sure that we're still all on the same page, or Thomas, whichever one y'all wants to take.
Council, on amending the zoning table 4.1, basically what we were doing with that is we were adding some uses to certain zoning districts to give us a better use of our planned business district, to allow us to better regulate a few uses such as storage units, salvage yards, and like major and minor, I believe it was mechanical repair. Basically to do the uses that sometimes cause some issues. I start like with the salvage yard and the mechanical repair, and then storage units. That way we can better use the land. We don't have to go and zone something like a B1. They said they want to do storage units. We zoned it a B1, and then they are putting like a gas station there or something like that. So what we did is we amended the zoning table to allow us to better use that PBD district, and we also added tow truck services to the allowed uses in the city. The reason why we did that is because we actually had a whole ordinance about tow trucks, about what they had to have on their tow trucks and stuff like that. We actually did not have a place for them inside the city with our zoning ordinances currently. So we added that use, and we put them in a PBD zone along with our M zones, which are areas where you need more area to do your job, but you might become somewhat of an issue to the public around you, so you don't want that like around residential neighborhoods and those type of things. So,
and the PBD, when they apply for a PBD, they have to have very specific plans already that they take to the planning commission, and that what comes in front of us, right?
Yes, sir. So basically what they'll do when they apply for a PBD is they will bring us their concept of what they want to do. They'll lay it out. They'll say this is a use that they want to use it for, and they have to stick to that plan. That way, like I said, you don't have any kind of issue with somebody zoning something for one use and then going back and doing another use. That allows us to better use the land, to better restrict what's going on inside the city. Like with this one that you're about to read is a storage unit development, but that will allow us to know where the setbacks are going to be, how it's going to affect the neighboring property owners, and that type of thing before you vote on it.
Any questions on the amendment to the zoning ordinance? And then this Howell rezone is directly related to that, right?
Yes, sir. So with the Howell rezone, we needed to go ahead and get the table amended before we could even allow storage units inside of the PBD zone. So that is directly affected by the ruling on that.
And Planning Commission made a recommendation to accept the Howell rezone, right?
Yes, sir. The Planning Commission made a recommendation to approve our KPS, our long range plan. They looked at it. They gave us a thumbs up as well. And we also talked to the airfield, and Paul Meisner with the airfield, and Colonel Holcomb actually came down and gave the Planning Commission a presentation, and they gave us a thumbs up as well for it.
And staff, of course.
Yes, sir. Staff was in favor.
All right. Any questions on the Howell rezone? All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, now moving on to everybody's favorite topic, the authorization of operation of medical cannabis dispensing sites. So So we're going to have a public hearing on that tonight. It was introduced at the last meeting. Any Jonathan, did you have some comments on this?
Council members, I don't know if any of you attended the kind of online training that was out there. Okay, so just a little bit of background on this. This was approved by the state legislature. They formed a medical cannabis commission from the state to talk about how it's regulated. So in other words, if they have one, how it's got to be 1,000 feet from the property line, from like schools, churches, all that kind of stuff. Additionally, it's very tightly controlled in terms of what can be sold there. So I know a lot of people that had misconceptions, maybe that people would be like in Colorado or other states that have dispensaries where you can buy marijuana and smoke it, or take gummies or do whatever. It's not like that. You have to have a prescription by a doctor for. There's about I think 16 different prescriptions that you can, like PTSD, cancer, etc. And there are certain ways that it can be delivered. So I think there's 8. So one of those are like a pill. One of them is like a suppository. And they have this list. So it's very tightly controlled. It's probably one of the tightest, if not the tightest, controlled in terms of regulations in the United States. Now, that being said, if you chose to approve that in enterprise, there would still be time. I think 12 to 18 months would be the earliest that we would ever see one here, because of the way the commission will hand out licenses. So there's 37 dispensaries that can be allowed in the state, period. So if one were to make its way to Enterprise, Alabama, it would be a fairly long lead time before they award the licenses to. In other words, it wouldn't happen tomorrow. This would take at least 12 to 18 months for them to even get licensed. They have a thorough background check, that kind of stuff that they have to go through, and then they have to get approval for the site. So additionally, as we talk about the cannabis regulations for the city, that would give us time, if you approved it, to go back and look at our zoning, look at business licenses, those kind of things that would impact and better regulate. So we can't go beyond what the state approved, but we can make it tighter in terms of the regulations. So if we didn't want them to be, or it to be downtown or another area in town, you would have the ability to set that through the zoning tables, and as we amend that process. So you can control some of those things in the city if you permit it. But the first stage would be if you wanted it here or allowed it here, you would vote, and then we would have a week to send that ordinance to the Medical Cannabis Commission, and then they would log it, and there's no guarantee that anything would even come here. That's up to a private business.
So we would have no control over whether one actually came to Enterprise or not. That's completely up to the commission.
That's correct. And like I said, they would go through a pretty strict process. So if one wanted to come here, they couldn't just put it up into any particular facility. I mean, they have lighting requirements, parking requirements, visibility, controlling what kind of signage can be put up. And certainly we can be more restrictive at the municipal level, but there are already some pretty, so as a good example, I mentioned 1,000 feet from property line to property line. So if a dispensary, we're talking not the front door to front door like we have with alcohol, which is 300 feet in the city of Enterprise from front door to front door. It's 1,000 feet from property line to property line. So if you had a 5-acre site, anywhere along the border of that 5-acre site, 1,000 feet in any direction, it can't go. So to a church, to a school, to those sort of places. So it's pretty restrictive.
So you might have any any questions? Rainer, I assume you've vetted this ordinance with state law.
I actually wrote it based on what the other cities
Passed. Yeah. So, I mean, I'll give my thoughts on it. In my opinion, the legislature, convened a task force, a study group. It was vetted by our elected officials in Montgomery. They passed this. Medical cannabis, as they call it, is coming to Alabama regardless of what we do. I've talked to doctors. It's going to be prescribed in Enterprise. It's going to be prescribed in our neighboring communities, especially in end of life and cancer type situations. Those will probably be the most common that where we see it, especially with our friends and loved ones, family members. So in my opinion, all we're deciding is whether somebody has to drive to Montgomery or to Dothan or to wherever to receive this medication. In my opinion, it's not our role to stand between the doctors and their patients. So I'm supportive of it. I don't really have, this is a very simple, really a one-page ordinance. So not a lot of leeway there. Any other comments or questions on it?
I would certainly be in favor of it. It sounds like to me they have more restrictions for it than necessary when it's the only way you can get the drug is through a doctor's prescription.
Mm-hmm.
And like you say, if someone needs it, why would they have to drive to Montgomery or Dothan for it? I think it should be available here.
I certainly, I'm in favor of it for those reasons also, and even considering we're going to have a veterans home here, I look at it from that standpoint that I would want it available if our citizens or vets need it.
Yeah, I agree too with the veterans. Yeah, with that. I also have a family member that out in California is having a problem. They're on that, and it's really giving them a little better quality of life. So,
all right. Any other comments? All right, we'll move forward to the business license code. Leanne or Jonathan, one. I know y'all have briefed us on this multiple times.
If you recall, about a month ago, we provided you a list of, I think it was an Excel spreadsheet of questions, comments that we received at the mayor's office or from you all with some of your constituents or business owners in your respective districts. We consolidated that list, gave the category, the type of questions, comments, or complaints, problems that they illustrated with the business license code, and then we kind of enumerated out to the side a staff recommendation on how to address those, or if we felt that the complaint was warranted or not. And so with that, we gave that to you, like I said, about a month ago for your review. We didn't really receive any feedback based on the staff recommendations. So with that, we put this ordinance back before you and just kind of took that to mean that the staff recommendations were in line with what your thought process was on those changes to the ordinance.
Any questions or concerns on this? Yeah, I mean, I think it was consistent with what had been discussed before. I don't have anything. All right, moving on to asbestos removal. Oh, go ahead, Leanne.
Just really quick, we will have a couple of additional things that will need to be updated on the business license ordinance, just based on some things tonight that we're introducing, and then of course the medical marijuana dispensaries and facilities. Depending on how the vote goes on that, there will be additional things that we will bring to council that will need to be voted on, and hopefully before renewal season in January, so that we can get those updated prior to issuing those, needing to do those licenses. So those are not included, but we'll bring those to you based on what the council decides tonight.
Gotcha. Everybody good with that?
Good.
All right, asbestos removal and abatement, Jug Brown Rec Center. I see we've gotten some bids back and a recommendation to accept that.
We do. We're taking bids actually on the new rec center next Wednesday at 2 p.m. The schedule was to begin construction after the first of the year, so we pushed back the demo of the site. We wanted to finish up demolition of the old rec center and move right into construction with the new one right behind it. So we took bids on the asbestos portion. We had 3 buildings on that site that had hazardous material in it. So what you have before you is the low responsive bidder, and staff recommends that we move forward with that. It'll take them, 2 weeks to get the asbestos out, and we'll still have time to get the buildings down before the end of the year.
And we're still planning on performing that in-house.
The
After
demolition,
the abatement.
all demolition will be done in-house once the asbestos is removed.
Okay. Any questions of Barry? All right. Thank you, Barry.
Yes,
We've got a few new business items. The first couple are just introductions. So we're going to introduce a recommendation to approve the Lynette de Jesus on behalf of Danny Lane for the rezoning of 0.231 acres from R65 to TH1. And the actual rezone is being introduced also, ordinance 110122. We'll, of course, bring those back up in December 6th. So plenty of time to do our homework on those, ask any questions of staff. Next item is the regulation of short-term rentals, something that we hadn't talked about recently, but we talked about in great detail back, I don't know, when was that? Been earlier this year, or was it late last year? So it was later last year. So why don't you give us an introduction, Jonathan?
So, you may recall this, but it sounded like the consensus from the council when we started talking about short-term rentals was that maybe it wasn't as big of a problem as maybe it seemed to be because of one incident that came up. And so certainly we needed to address it because these folks are running a business. We didn't have a way for them to remit lodging tax, and it wasn't in our code. So we looked around at a lot of different cities in our area, in the state, to find out some of the best business practices that they were using to address that. And since that time, if you recall, some of our neighboring cities even tried to introduce short-term rental ordinances, pulled them back, and then made revisions to them. And so I do think that was a prudent, not to rush to judgment, to overreact to the problem at hand. And so the staff came up, again, talking to our police, our fire department. I mean, literally this has been vetted with all departments in the city to try to find what I heard you say, which was you wanted something that was common sense. If we have laws on the books to address nuisances like noise or something like that, let them call the police and take it up. But in the essence of promoting personal property rights for someone to use this, if they wanted to use their property for rental 180 days or less. And then if there were other restrictions, like they lived in a HOA or an area that had one, that the HOA could be the person or entity that restricted the use within the HOA if they wanted to do that. So that was the mindset we went into as we crafted this based on what we heard from the council. And that's the document you see that's introduced before you. Certainly looking for feedback from you if we hit the mark or if we, maybe misjudged, what your intent was behind the ordinance.
So obviously we're not going to, it's just been introduced tonight, not going to pass it if we decide to introduce it. Any number of things we can do. We can go ahead and introduce the staff's recommendation, which is ordinance 110122A. We can take it off the agenda and work together to come up with a different draft, or we can just go ahead and introduce it and spend the next 2 weeks, or we can call for we can bring it back up in the December meeting if we want. So any thoughts on how we want to proceed with this?
I think the majority of what I read in this does seem to fall in line with what we had discussed. I do have one question in here where it has in at least one spot, maybe two spots, where it talks about during the license period that additional requirements may be imposed by the city through the chief of police, fire chief, or engineering department. What controls those requirements? That, I guess the biggest thing, my question is not to pass something that is then open-ended for a bureaucracy within the city to start throwing their list of rules on top that were not intended by the council.
In some of those instances, it would be mainly in the event of public safety, that we find there's something that, is a requirement that may be not enumerated there, or best business practices passed by the state fire code that wasn't a requirement prior to that we could administratively go in and enforce some of those code requirements. Same with public safety for police, building code. If we adopt, through this KPS plan, a new code that may be more stringent, and how we apply that, where it wouldn't have to necessarily be enumerated in the ordinance, but it's updated with the code, the current code that the city's under.
Right. Well, I guess my real question on that is not so much as what our current group of people would do, but what does this keep from, I think sometimes when you leave things open-ended, that it can be real open-ended if we're not careful with that. And that's just a concern of mine.
I think it's a valid concern. I guess
I don't want to tie the hands of the staff.
Right. So, I think it's, as with anything the council does, you got to balance, getting it right from a council and policy standpoint, but then also balancing that with giving mayor and his staff the leeway needed in, as they conduct day-to-day business, to stay nimble enough to address things. But, I guess I would say those concerns should be alleviated by the fact that the council, if the council ever felt that the mayor and staff were being too, heavy-handed, they have the opportunity at any time to come in and amend the ordinance to a more restrictive nature, either less restrictive or more restrictive, however. Is that, you follow me there?
Oh yeah, and I really, it's not so much wanting to change it, it's just to kind of bring that point up.
No, I thought the same thing when I read that too. I think we should be.
I know we've, as a council, have all been very careful in any ordinances to make sure that we were very intentional with what we were saying.
Right.
And I just want to make sure we weren't leaving our normal operations to leave something open-ended there. I think the other thing that there's a few things in here that I'm like, okay, whatever, it's no big deal. I just kind of skipped over. But the one thing to me that was a little concerning and I felt was too restrictive was giving the owners a 15-minute window to respond. That is a very, very tight window, especially if it's in the middle of the night and someone's asleep. To say they're in violation because they don't answer within 15 minutes is, I find that too restrictive.
Okay, we can look at that.
I think that would be my number one.
What time frame would you recommend?
I don't know. Maybe you just take a number of these people that are going to be running these are real estate agents, owners of real estate businesses. I know that have them. What if they're the one that's supposed to take that call and they're in a meeting with a client and they don't see their phone for 15 minutes? That's my concern. I don't know. I think it should, at minimum, should it be extended to an hour? I don't think anything less than an hour would be fair.
I would be curious on how, was that 15 minutes from another city, Rainer, or was that a recommendation? Was that kind of a majority, or was it an average?
Just from what we saw, I think we looked at Tuscaloosa primarily, but probably. But I mean, I see no issue with us changing.
Yeah, I would go for something a little bit longer than 15 minutes.
That's the only thing I saw that we didn't really I didn't recall discussing when we were discussing, and I thought it was a little.
I understand the need to have someone available
Right.
if there's an emergency or a major situation going on. That owner's got to be available.
Right. I just thought the 15 minutes was just
Can we
that's a little
get
too petty
consensus
for me.
around
Yeah.
1
Sure.
hour?
Yeah, I could definitely.
Yeah, I'd go with
1
that.
hour.
Yeah.
So let me find, which one is this? This is 110122A.
Yeah. It's D on 3. Page
Can you give me
3,
that section? Greg?
It's page 3, D.
bottom of the page.
Beverly,
Very
where
last
is
thing
it?
on the page.
Is it in my packet?
Yeah, it's not
I know it was in the. It's not in blue. Okay, that's why.
I think part of,
110122A.
part of the reason we
Page 3, the last paragraph on the page.
So I'm gonna change that to 60 minutes.
And Councilman, just so you're aware, I think one of the reasons we looked at that was, if you compare it to other types of businesses that are in enterprise, whether it's a hotel, a longer term rental property, bed and breakfast, typically, the owner is responsive, or they have a manager on site or a management company that would be responsive if somebody needed to be evicted or make a decision on behalf of the owner. And so I think that's where we were trying to figure out if there's, something that needed to be done, how do we do that and do it quickly? So
Well, I agree there needs to be a quick response.
I just didn't want you to think that we were just throwing, numbers out. I think that was what are other places doing, but I think that's a good compromise.
All right, so is everybody okay with at least introducing this tonight? I'm putting nobody under the gun of are we going to adopt this in 2 weeks? And is 2 weeks enough, or do we want to?
I feel like we should introduce it tonight, but of course not to suspend the rules and vote.
Right, yeah, no, I'm not in favor of voting on it tonight. I think we need a review period. Is everybody okay with our normal, typical two-week review period? So we'll call for a public hearing tonight, and we'll have a public hearing at our second meeting in November, with that one change of 60 minutes. All right, any other comments before we move on? All right, so going to authorize the mayor to execute a use agreement with the First Methodist Church regarding the Family Life Center. This is surrounding the closure of our rec center due to construction, right?
Correct. At the last council meeting, I distributed a draft agreement with the First United Methodist Church and Enterprise. They have a gym. In the past, we have used that. I know last basketball season, Parks and Rec needed to use it. The basketball program has continued to grow. We will no longer have Moose Hope in the fold going forward, at least for this year, potentially next year as well. And Billy Powell and Blake have requested to be able to do this. First United Methodist Church is not charging the city to utilize that space. And I think Rayner's vetted the agreement as well as calling our insurance company to make sure that we're covered for anything that might happen with participants out at the church, protect them from liability and the city.
Any questions, concerns on that? All right, then we've got our annual employee luncheon on December 14th. We're just authorizing that and setting our Christmas holiday schedule for this year on observing, because Christmas falls on the weekend, we're going to observe Christmas Eve on Friday and Christmas on Monday, which is the federally observed day for Christmas. So any concerns about either of those items revolving around our Christmas celebrations? All right, then well, there will not be a mayor's report, but I will give the mayor's report in my closing comments, which are fairly brief. Then, of course, y'all have opportunity to speak also. And then we've got a brief E911 board meeting. Anything we need to discuss about it? Just approving the purchase of the vehicle, right?
Correct.
Yeah, so we can have that discussion in more detail at the board meeting. So don't go anywhere after we adjourn. All right. Any concerns with the agenda? Additions, deletions? Seeing none, we will move back to our work session agenda. So let's talk about employee Christmas bonus.
So in your packet, you'll see a memorandum from our HR director. In that memo, she talks about the annual employee Christmas bonus. Behind that, there's a resolution from 2015 that was passed authorizing the current pay, which is $100 per employee. So it hasn't been updated since 2015. In looking at it, and based on the recommendation from the HR director, the mayor and I are in support of her recommendation to increase that to $150 for full-time employees and part-time and seasonal employees to be at $75. It would increase about a little over $11,000 to the city's budget, but based on the number of vacancies that we have, we think it would be absorbed in the current budget that you passed. So in essence, creating budget neutral situation.
All right. Any questions about that adjustment? Okay. Housing Authority. We have a request from the Enterprise Housing Authority, and I believe a recommendation from mayor and staff. So
on October 11th, the mayor's office received a request from Enterprise Housing Authority, Ms. Demby, requesting that for this year only would be the mayor's recommendation and my recommendation that we remit back the pilot check, payment in lieu of taxes, that the Housing Authority pays the City of Enterprise. This year's payment, $21,011.38. In speaking with Ms. Demby and the mayor, we talked about the current economic climate and with inflation and what that does. So they get a little over $160,000, $170,000 a year right now to make improvements throughout all of their properties. They have about 125 here in the city, and so this would help, extend the life of some of those units. I talked to Leanne in reference to how this would impact our budget. It should not impact our budget negatively. And again, this recommendation would only be to support this in this 1 year because of the economic conditions that are set. Hopefully, the Housing and Urban Development Office would, make some adjustments in the future to take account in inflation. But they certainly haven't at this point through this year. And I don't know how many of you have driven through our areas that the Enterprise Housing Authority manages, but Shanna does a really good job with limited resources. And so after speaking with her and the mayor, our recommendation is to support that request and send those funds back.
Does anybody have any questions or concerns, Jonathan, on this program or this request? Okay. All right, that is all of our agenda. You have anything else?
Just for your consideration, I've distributed a copy of the proposed 2023 holiday schedule
Does
to you.
everybody have that? That was a late addition to our packets.
Typically, we publish those at the beginning of every year. I received this from Kim Hughes with Engineering and Public Works this afternoon. That's why it's a late edition. In speaking with our departments, this would be our recommendation moving forward. Wanted to submit that to you for your review. Certainly don't need any action tonight, but just to have any discussion if we have time. We're a few minutes ahead of schedule right now on the work session agenda, but I didn't know if there were any dates or closures that you had any issue with based on that schedule.
So it's pretty straightforward. You and I discussed this. Really, the only one that's not is involving Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. Christmas Eve falls on a Sunday. Christmas Day falls on a Monday of 2023, and you've discussed this.
Correct. So I talk, really the only department that would impact, or the one that would impact the most, would be our sanitation department. Our police and our fire departments are going to work 24/7 regardless, and they're prepared to staff that, whether we take day off or 2 days off in a week and it's a short work week. But in speaking with Shannon Roberts and Barry Mott on that subject, they believe that they can handle the load over a 3-day period to get the trash picked up and back on schedule the next week.
Any questions on this? So I guess y'all just need to get us an ordinance by the end of the year or a resolution to approve this, right?
Correct. Any other issues or concerns about the holiday schedule? Okay, then we'll work on that, Councilman. Thank you.
All right. Any other staff present that wishes to discuss anything? We've got about 5 minutes before we take a short break. Everybody good? All right. Well, we will recess. Wait.
I thought Barry.
Okay, Barry.
Last council meeting, Ms. Rich asked me about the TAP grant, and I wanted to give you those dates if I could real quickly. Talked to the consultant. The 65% submittal was submitted in June. They're expecting to have environmental done this December, which means, long story short, we should be going to bid about June of next year. It's about a 3-month project to get that sidewalk project done. So by September of next year, all the sidewalks should be complete under that TAP grant. There is a good bit of ALDOT review, environmental review, and all that goes because it was grant money tied to that project. So that's the reason for the timeline being extended like it is. But 60% has been submitted. Environmental completion should be done by December 1st. They're shooting to have 90% into ALDOT by January 3rd. So between January 3rd and June is ALDOT's review period and get ready to go to bid. So consultant will have everything finished, 90% review in by January to go to construction we'll go to bid by June 2nd. I just want to give you those dates.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Any questions?
Yeah, Chief Davis, is it appropriate? Would you like to give an update on the smoke detector thing that we did? I think the council would love to hear that. Sorry to put you on the spot. Oh, you want to do staff reports? That's fine.
No, we're good.
Okay.
I'm glad to talk about it. After the last couple of weeks, this is a solid thing. So you guys know that we did Operation Smoke Detector, the Blitz, which is basically we chose streets which had the highest number of fires, along with either no or non-working smoke detector. So we went out with the assistance of Scotty Johnson and the Coffee County Emergency Response Team, and Pastor White, who brought it to Facebook Live and brought all kinds of energy, and John's Chapel AME Church. We were able to canvass the area, give out 127 detectors, which, again, doesn't sound like a large amount, but that equates 58 houses and 132 of our citizens, which are protected now, that weren't before. And we still have 10 pending that we're scheduling time to go out and take care of those, put them up. So it ended up being a huge success. We plan on doing another one in March. And hopefully we just end up with more and more partners. And the goal, realistic or not, smoke detectors in every house, no matter what. Now I would say, I would love to issue a challenge to those that lease houses or rent houses. It's not a negative thing, but for them to check their structures that they are leasing out and make sure that they do have the safety equipment that, quite honestly, we know can save lives. So.
And that's one thing in this. I know you reviewed it, the short-term rental, some good requirements around life safety on that.
Yes, it utilizing the terminology there as far as up to code allows for newer houses that are going to become short-term rentals and older ones without putting any kind of undue difficulties on them. We're not going to take a 60-year-old house and make sure that they have specific wiring for interconnected smoke detectors or anything like that. Yes, those things are extremely important. Having working or operable doors and windows, that kind of stuff, to make sure that people can get out.
Right.
And obviously, we appreciate that because that's half the battle.
Right.
Now, am I correct? Y'all not only gave these smoke detectors away, you installed them.
It was up to them. So we had 15 homes that opted for us to install them. So we called them to schedule. And quite honestly, not everybody was prepared for us. So,
yeah.
You know, they preferred the idea of us calling and making a schedule. 5 of those have been taken care of. We're still waiting on 10. We made some calls today. But yes, absolutely. The choice was absolutely theirs. If they wanted to put them up, we gave them advice on how many they needed per home. Many of them brought us inside to show us what they had. Or they could take the other option, which we made contact with them after the fact, and we're scheduling those.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chief. All right. Anything else from staff? All right. We will recess for about 10 minutes and reconvene in our regular meeting of the City Council at 6 o'clock. There's some agendas up front. Agendas are up front if anybody wishes to grab those. You might need a drink.
No, thanks, Charlie. Listen, I went on there and got these papers. I kept getting ads card, and it was mine.
You about got it all worked out, and you got that calculator.
What's the date of our next meeting? It'll be the 15th.
I thought I saw something. October 4th. Did I do that last one? It was October 4th.
No, we didn't have an executive session.
I saw it in the minutes.
No.
Okay, maybe I'm.
The 18th we did, I think.
Miss Rings. Yeah. And that was 6 years now. I think that's the first. Yeah, we had some.
We need to do more of that.
I'd say it's the first time.
Yeah, we're trying to do more interaction. The chamber, we're talking about going out there as well as doing coming here.
Of course, yeah, during COVID. We'll go home and throw all my kids' candy away. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I've got 6 o'clock, so I will call this meeting of the Enterprise City Council to order. Let the record show that all council members are present. As you will notice, our mayor is absent this evening. He is in Dothan at a meeting of the municipalities of the 2nd Congressional District representing the city, so he is on official business tonight. So if you will, please, rise for the opening prayer and Pledge of Allegiance. We've got Lieutenant Colonel Peter T. Hoffman from Fort Rucker Chaplain's Office to lead us in our opening prayer.
Let's pray. Oh God, our Father, we recognize you as the sovereign ruler over all the nations and cities, to whom all powers of earth must one day bend the knee and give an account. Forgive us when we, who are in positions of leadership, use our power to gain advantages for ourselves. Remind us this day and always that if we are to be the greatest, we must become the least, and that if we are to be leaders, we must become the servants of others. Grant us zeal for justice and righteousness, while always being ready with compassion for those who are weak. Give these elected officials of Enterprise the desire to do your will, so that they may govern with justice, love mercy, and walk humbly with you, O God. In Jesus' name I pray.
Amen. Let's join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. You may be seated. Council, you should have the agenda in front of you that we discussed in the prior work session. I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda as submitted.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. We'll now consider the consent agenda. All matters listed within the consent agenda have been distributed to each member of the council for review, are considered to be routine, and will be enacted by one motion of the City Council with no separate discussion. If separate discussion is desired on an item, that item may be removed from the consent agenda and placed on the regular agenda by request of a member of the City Council. I now call for a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
So moved.
Second.
All right, with a motion and a second, is there any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. All right, we now have the part of the meeting called Privilege of the Floor. This allows anyone present here tonight to address the council for a total of 3 minutes about anything that they wish. I will bring to your attention that we do have a few public hearings tonight, so if you're here to address us about the ordinance 100422, which is amending the zoning ordinance, the Howell rezone, the authorizing of the operation of medical cannabis dispensing sites, or amending the business license code, then you will have an opportunity later in the meeting. Those are all coming up next in old business. If you're here to address anything else, now would be the time to do that. Is there anyone here to address the council? All right. Seeing no one. Oh. Yes, ma'am. All right, please speak clearly into the microphone. Tell us your name and
Good evening. I'm Gina Esparza. I am a short-term rental owner, and I know that you guys are not voting on the short-term rental things tonight. I do ask you guys to take consideration of other short-term rental owners to come before you and discuss things. I don't want to speak on behalf of everyone because I did get an opportunity to read the ordinance, and I would like other Airbnb owners or short-term rental owners to discuss and have an opportunity to read it before it is voted on. And a lot of us had no idea about it. I just had the privilege to know, and I did not share it because I didn't realize it was going to be presented before you guys tonight.
Yeah. So, you know, it was distributed to us late last week. It is posted online on the council agenda site. So feel free to reference that site, send it out to anybody. So it's, like you said, simply being introduced tonight. We've got to introduce it before we can have a public hearing and discuss it. So.
And I was told this is going to be a long process too to discuss, but you guys are voting on it the next meeting. Am I correct with that?
We can vote on it as soon as tonight, but we agreed in the work session that we're not going to vote on it tonight. So if we choose, then we would vote on it in 2 weeks. Yeah.
Okay. All I ask is to hear out other short-term rentals owners because I don't want to speak on behalf of everyone.
All right.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Anybody else? Is anybody else here tonight to address the council? All right. We will move on with staff reports. Any additional staff reports that didn't have the opportunity to address this in work session? All right, moving on to old business. We now have a public hearing and consideration of ordinance 10-0422, which is amending the zoning ordinance. I now call for a public hearing prior to consideration of ordinance 10-0422, providing to amend table 4-1 of the enterprise zoning ordinance to add certain allowed uses in planned business district, PDB, highway commercial district, B3, light industry district, M1, industrial park district, M2, and General Industry District M3, and to amend use definitions. This public hearing is now open. Is there anyone here to speak for or against this ordinance? All right, seeing no one, we will now close the hearing. I'll entertain a motion to adopt the ordinance 10-0422.
So moved.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. All right, we'll now have a public hearing and consideration of ordinance 10-0422A for the Howell rezone. Now call for a public hearing prior to consideration of ordinance 10-0422A, providing for the rezone of 18.757 acres of land owned by Brent Howell from AGRIC-2 Agricultural District to PDB Planned Business District located off of Shellfield Road. This hearing is now open. Is there anyone here to speak for or against this ordinance? Seeing no one, I'll now close the hearing and entertain a motion to adopt ordinance 10-0422A.
So moved.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign.
Nay.
All right, motion carries 4-1. All right, we now have a public hearing and consideration of ordinance 10-18-22, authorizing operation of medical cannabis dispensing sites. I now call for a public hearing prior to consideration of ordinance 10-18-22, authorizing the operation of medical cannabis dispensing sites within the corporate limits of the City of Enterprise as per the provisions of Act 21-450 of the Alabama Legislature. This public hearing is now open. Is there anyone here to speak for or against this ordinance? Seeing no one, I'll now close the hearing and entertain a motion to adopt ordinance 10-18-22.
So moved.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Motion carries 4-1. All right, we'll now have a public hearing and consideration of ordinance 10-18-22A to amend the business license code. I now call for a public hearing prior to consideration of Ordinance 10-1822A, providing for an amendment to Ordinance 08-1721C relating to the implementation of a new business license code. The amendment calls for the addition of NACE codes 238-990, 311-811, 518210, 541611, 541850, and 561510 in Section 31, adjusts Schedule R and amends portions of fee schedules D, E, and V in Section 32 of the Business License Code. This public hearing is now open. Is there anyone here to speak for or against this ordinance? Seeing no one, we'll now close the public hearing and entertain a motion to adopt Ordinance 10-1822A.
So moved.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. We'll now review and consider a bid recommendation for the asbestos removal and abatement of MN Jug Brown Recreation Center. I now introduce and call for consideration of a recommendation from City Engineer, Public Works Director Barry Mott to award bid requisition number 2022-06 for the removal and abatement of asbestos and other hazardous materials at the MN Jug Brown Recreation Center to West Alabama Contracting Incorporated in the amount of $32,950. Other bids received are as follows: Montgomery Environmental Incorporated for $53,400. I'll entertain a motion to approve this recommendation.
I move that we approve the recommendation.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. All right, moving on to new business. We'll introduce some Planning Commission recommendations. So I introduce for the record a recommendation from the Enterprise Planning Commission to approve the following request for the rezone of property. A request by Lynette De Jesus on behalf of Danny Lane for the rezoning of .231 acres of land from R65 Residential District to TH1 Townhouse District located off of Gundy Lane. We also are going to introduce Ordinance 110122, which is the lane rezone. I introduce Ordinance 110122, providing for the rezone of .231 acres of land owned by Danny Lane from R65 Residential District to TH1 Townhouse District located off of Gundy Lane. We'll also call for a public hearing to be held at the regular meeting scheduled for December 6, 2022. There will be no action taken tonight. We'll now introduce Ordinance 110122A regarding the regulation of short-term rentals. I introduce Ordinance 110122A providing for regulations associated with short-term rentals. We'll also call for a public hearing on November 15th, 2022. We'll now consider authorizing the mayor to execute a use agreement with Enterprise First United Methodist Church Family Life Center. I call for a motion to authorize the mayor to execute an agreement with Enterprise First United Methodist Church, providing for the use of Enterprise First United Methodist Church Family Life Center facility for city basketball programs as per the terms of the use agreement. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All right, I have a motion and a second to authorize the mayor to execute this agreement. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. We'll now consider the request to close city offices for annual employee luncheon. I introduce and call for consideration of requests from Human Resources Director Christina Meissner to close all city offices from 11 a.m. until 1 p.m. on Wednesday, December 14th, 2022, to allow city employees to participate in the annual Christmas luncheon to be held at the Enterprise Civic Center. Do I hear a motion to approve this request?
So moved.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. We'll now introduce and call for consideration of a request from Human Resources Director Christina Meissner that the Christmas Eve holiday for city employees be observed on Friday, December 23rd. Christmas will be observed on Monday, December 26th. Do I hear a motion to approve this request?
So moved.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. We'll skip over the mayor's report. I'll handle that here in a minute. Ms. Rich, do you have any comments?
Thank everyone for coming out tonight. To Mrs. Sparza, who you addressed us about the short-term rentals and the opportunity to hear from our Airbnb owners. We I think this has been going on close to a year now. Even tonight in our work session, we even tweaked a couple of things, but there was a couple of work sessions that we heard from a room full. So I'm sure some of your colleagues can fill you in as well, but we certainly want you to come back when we bring it up again. Thank everyone for coming.
Mr. Goolsby?
I'd like to thank everyone for coming tonight. I think we had a successful weekend of trick-or-treating and other events. Downtown had people going and coming all weekend, Friday night, Saturday night. Merchants passing out candy yesterday, even Westgate Shopping Center. So I just want to thank everybody for their efforts. Went over real well.
Mr. Padgett?
Thank everyone for coming tonight. And the short-term rental that you brought up earlier, if anyone has anything they would like to discuss prior to, I think I'm definitely speaking for myself, probably the rest of these council members would be willing to listen to that if constituents wanted to bring that to our attention.
Yeah, I agree too. We don't know what we don't know. Please get them on the site so they can at least look at it for there. But thank you everyone for coming. And thank you for all our citizens that are online watching us. And thank you again, Chief, for the opportunity for the Coffee County Community Emergency Response Team to participate with the smoke detectors. It was a great event. We got a lot out of it. And my team members are looking forward to the next time we can do that with Battalion Chief Beasley. So thank you very much.
All right. Like I said, I've got the mayor's report for the city council meeting. So the Veterans Day is next Friday, November 11th. All city offices will be closed. At 5 p.m., there will be a wreath laying at the Wall of Heroes at Johnny Henderson Park. At 6 p.m., there will be a tribute ceremony at the Civic Center. Both events are free and open to the public to attend. Also, please note that the garbage collection schedule will change next week due to the holiday. Garbage pickup regularly scheduled for Thursday, November 10th, will be picked up on Wednesday, November 9th. Garbage pickup regularly scheduled for Friday, November 11th, will be picked up on Thursday, November 10th. As far as recent city events, we set a new record for Bowlville Fall Festival with more than 11,000 event visitors based on geofencing data from Alabama Power. Spooky in the City and Trick or Treat on Main Street also had a record turnout this past weekend. We're gearing up for a busy holiday season in the City of Enterprise. As always, please follow us on Facebook or visit our city website for news and event organization. So that concludes the mayor's report. And yeah, ditto what everybody said. Scotty, you brought up looking online. So like I said earlier, our council packets are posted online. I went in this afternoon and made sure that it is in fact up. We did make one small amendment to the ordinance that is posted online. So Beverly, if you could make that correction, we changed it. There's a 15-minute, correct me if I'm wrong, Greg, a 15-minute wait period for response from operators to a 60-minute time limit. So that detail was changed tonight in the ordinance that was actually introduced in the meeting. So, of course, we've got the leeway to make other amendments whenever we're convened in the meeting, and we can obviously address those immediately, or we can lay them over and address them at future times. But that is all we've got for tonight. After we adjourn, we will reconvene in an E911 board meeting. So if you wish, you can stick around for that. Everybody have a good evening. Thank you. Do we have a packet? There it is. We've got to sign some.